Okay, I want to begin class viewing a bit from last class and answering answering some of the questions you had in the exit poll. I find the polling very helpful because it lets me know what's on your mind and what you're thinking about. I'll go through these questions in a minute. So we have 3 or 4 doctrines, depending on how you count, we've learned so far. We have acquisition by discovery. We have acquisition by, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's a great question. So far we've done 3 or 4 doctrines, depending on your count. Depending on how you count them. Acquisition by discovery. We have acquisition by conquest. And we have the rule of capture. I'll do the rule of capture last. The doctrine of acquisition by discovery concerns territory, land. That is, one nation finds a country or finds some land, and they found it prior to other European nations. Okay? The rule of discovery says the first nation that finds it gets to stake a claim over the other nations. The second doctrine, conquest, also concerns land or territory. It generally applies to taking land by force. That could be if there are native people there or some other country that's present. Okay? These 2 doctrines, again, concern land. The third doctrine is the rule of capture. Okay, the rule of capture concerns wild animals and other types of fugitive resources, like a baseball, oil, gas, things that move around. Okay? Do not apply conquest and discovery for wild animals. It's wrong. Do not apply capture for land. That's wrong. Warned you. You'll do it on the exam, I promise you. You'll still make that mistake. Many times I warned you, but do not make that. I see a lot of you forgot your name tags. Please bring them. If you have them. That's how I know who you are. I can't learn names quite that quickly. If you got it home, just making sure to bring it for next class. Any questions so far? All right. I have here the questions from the exit poll. Okay. So the first question someone asked about the exam. I would always ask about the exam at the beginning of the semester. The exam's completely open book. That means whatever you want to bring on paper. You have to print it out. It can't be on your iPad. It has to be on paper. It will not help you. You'll see very quickly that an open book exam, your notes won't help you. In fact, if you're actually looking through your notes like this, flipping through, you're running out of time. You don't have enough time to use your notes. So I don't care what you bring. Bring whatever you want. It won't help you. It really won't. It's all essay. There's no multiple choice. So cheating is almost impossible. I'll know very quickly if you cheat because I read every essay myself. So have at it. But whatever you want. All right. I get a smiley face. Thank you, whoever sent that. Okay. Oh, yeah. So a couple people asked about this. So I assign the cases. I also assign the notes. Okay. You have to read the notes after the cases. Those are fair game. I may not talk about them in class, but they are fair game. Okay. Someone said they forgot their phone at home. If you have your computer, you can also check in on the iClicker in your browser. So you don't need the phone. So just check into that. Okay. All right. What other questions you have? You enjoy the video? Say it's very nice. I don't know who that was. I didn't bother checking. But remember there was an A and B and someone put T? They said I wasn't trying to be funny. I think fair is a weird word. And okay, whatever. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Go over the doctrines. Yes, we did that. The English case is hard to read. Yeah, I know. Deal with it. It's the world we live in. Yeah, so someone asked about equitable distribution, and this does come up very often. So if you remember in the baseball case, the judge basically said, well, Hayashi wins in the rule of capture, but we'll just divide the value of the ball in half. This actually is fairly common. Judges do this when they can't get a good result they like. So right now, there's actually a case in Italy that's been in the news. There's a home worth $500 million. Yes, I said $1 million. It's an ancient Italian villa with all this very expensive artwork painted on the walls. There was an inheritance fight. The wife from a second marriage is fighting the children from the first marriage, and they can't agree of how to inherit the house. What are they going to do? They're going to sell the house, split the proceeds in half. So it's actually very common to have this sort of equitable distribution like you saw in the baseball case. Again, how in-depth the notes? Yes, read them all. Tad confused, big picture. I think I did that. Someone asked about equivocal dominion. We'll come back to that in the very first poll question. Confused, rule of capture. Okay, video game at whale hunting. Okay. All right, I think that's about it. Anything? Did I miss anything? I'll try to do this in most classes, maybe not every class, but if I see there are certain questions that like repeat, I'll just make sure I hit them to make sure that you are not walking away confused because it's a lot of material. All right, any other questions before we get started? So a couple of you asked about this phrase, unequivocal dominion. And I want to just make that the first poll question we have for today. Oops. All right, so first question, short answer. What does unequivocal dominion mean? What does unequivocal dominion mean? All righty, another 10 seconds or so. All right, who's up next? Okay, then without the name tag, of course. Yeah, what was your name again?
It's Kimmy.
Kimmy, okay, Kimmy, thanks so much. Yeah, so I can't give a new one whenever you forget because I'll run out of name tags very quickly. Just bring it for Tuesday. Kimmy, how did you define unequivocal dominion?
I said like undisputable control or complete control or something.
What do you mean undisputable? What are you talking about undisputable?
Like there's no like evidence to show you didn't have to.
Where would this sort of disputing take place?
I guess in court.
In a court, right? So there's no contrary evidence, right? Okay. Isabella, you next?
Yeah.
Isabella, how do you define unequivocal dominion?
I kind of said the same thing. I said there was an undisputed evidence of physical control.
Ooh, okay, so you added a new word. She said control. You said physical control. What does physical control add to the situation?
Well, I was kind of referring to the baseball case where how actually everything is holding the ball.
Why is physical holding very important?
Because that's what makes it undisputable. Like you can
Ah,
see.
So if I'm just chasing and hunting down a fox and I don't touch it yet, I don't have physical bodily control. Okay, Pierre, let's see. How do you answer this question?
Well, so that physical control, I would say, is sort of viewed as because
Final, okay.
yeah, because in the end you can attempt to get control of something, but until you actually have it physically, that control is not undisputed.
Okay. All right, so I think all three of you gave me good definitions, and I'll try to synthesize it together. There's not like a one-sentence definition, but there are a couple things to think about. One, usually unequivocal dominion refers to bodily touch, right? Bodily touch. But it's not just touch, it's the word they use, control, right? You've controlled the item. This is why the baseball, I think, is a fun example, because the ball touched his glove, right? He touched the glove, but he didn't control it. It just flew away into, who knows where. Another thing I think that Kimmy mentioned was indisputable evidence, right? That some finder of fact can look at it and say, well, clearly this belongs to A, not B, right? There's no argument to the contrary. And then Pierre says finality. I kind of like that word, finality, right? That it's settled, right? There's no dispute that he has the ball. He walked away with it. Never showed it to the camera. He actually, he's kind of bragging about it. That's also part of the element. So there's a lot of things that go into it, but it's also context specific. So think of the whale case, for example. Can you put your hands around a whale? Of course not, right? You can't put a whale inside of your arms. So instead, you use things like anchors, harpoons, flags, different things to suggest that you have unequivocal dominion, unequivocal control. There's no dispute it's yours, right? If the whale washes ashore with your harpoon in it, it's yours. So it doesn't always require bodily touch. Sometimes a mortal wounding with your instrument might be sufficient. Okay, questions on that? All right, let's do the first case then. Pearson v. Post. This is probably the most famous case in law school after Marbury versus Madison. This got me the top 5. Every law student reads this case. You guys can ask your friends or relatives who are lawyers. Do you remember the Fox case? Oh, I remember the Fox case. Just trust me, this one. They'll remember the Fox case. You always remember the Fox case for whatever reason. It's in the it's burned in the psyche. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let me do a poll first before we get too far into it. This again is multiple choice. The answers are A and B. C is not an option. I'm sorry. Whoever put C, you're a free spirit. I appreciate your free spiritness, but there's just 2 choices here. If you were on the New York court, which opinion would you join? The majority by Judge Tompkins or the dissent by Judge Livingston? And there are 2 choices. Someone put D, not the above. That's not an option either. Now how to pick one. All right, I think I just bet everyone. Another 5 seconds. All right, let's see what the results are. Wow. That's pretty close. Ooh, sorry about that. It jumped. The app is very glitchy when it goes between screens. That is really close. 53-47. And what's fascinating, in my section this morning, it was the other way around. It was 47-53. Which is kind of so almost the same, but just a little bit reversed, right? 53-47. So this is pretty close, right? I think, you have about 60 of you here. You're all intelligent people. You're all smart. And you're basically split right down the middle. Now let's try to explain why you're all split down the middle. I think, Deborah, you next? Okay, Deborah, help us out here. Why don't you just give us the facts of what happened here?
So basically, Post, the plaintiff, they were in possession of like dogs and hounds that he was using.
What was he doing?
He was hunting.
He was a hunter. Yeah. So Post was a hunter. He was chasing with dogs and hounds. Okay, then what happened?
He was in pursuit of a fox.
Okay.
And essentially was just trying everything he could to get this fox, but he had not yet physically killed him or it.
I don't know if it's a boy or whatever, so it's fine. Yeah.
After seeing the efforts that he was putting into it, Pearson, the other person, wound up killing and carrying away the fox. So he was the one who ultimately shot it, killed it, and left with it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. That's very good. All right, so the facts here are painfully simple, right? Post was a hunter. He was chasing a fox. He was on a beach. This is not in the case, but I'll tell you. He was on a beach in New York. He was chasing a fox. At some point, he got close to the fox. And then at the last minute, Pearson, a jerk, okay, swoops in and kills the fox and takes him. And then Post sues Pearson for the value of the fox, the fur. Okay? Victoria, let me ask you a question, right? Do we know how long Post was actually chasing the hunters, the fox for? Sir? Oh, you shook your head? No. Okay, so the answer is no. Does it matter that we don't know how long he was hunting the fox for? Is that relevant to our discussion?
I think it could be, and with respect to the dissent's opinion. But apparently it's not included in this for a reason.
What if Post was just a liar, and he just started like 5 minutes in. He's like, oh man, there's that fox, and then like Pearson killed him. Do we know if that's true? Okay. Let's say another one. Let's say that Post was just a terrible hunter, that he was out in the field all day for 8 hours, didn't know what the heck he was doing, and then like, ooh, fox, right? Squirrel, right? And he just sees a squirrel. Squirrel. He sees a fox. Was he Up? That's a good movie. Yeah. So he sees a fox, right? And he just chased him at the last minute. Isn't that fact kind of relevant here? But the court seems to take Post's word, right? Victoria, last question. Why do you think the court sort of just accepts the word of the hunter here? Both the majority and the dissent, they seem to accept the facts as stated.
Yes. If we're referencing back to the case with the whale hunter, it was like applying that standard was that you like respect a hunter, I guess, and like the positions we hold in society. So I guess it was kind of applying that as well.
So they trust the hunters because this is like a respectable profession that they're trying to promote. Okay. All right. But just, I don't want you to lose sight of that fact. We'll come back to it later. We have no idea how long Post was actually hunting for. We have no idea, right? It's not the case at all. For all we know, he was hunting for 5 minutes with his, dogs, whatever. Maybe his dogs were taking a nap. We don't know. Maybe he was a bad hunter. If you put me in a field all day for 8 hours, I can hunt for 8 hours, not catch a damn thing, right? So it's, what do you call labor if a person's incompetent, right? Does that count? But just, I want to put that fact in your head for a moment, right? So we have this dispute. Post is hunting for some period of time. We don't know how long. Pearson shows up at the end, says, fox. Swipes the fox and takes him. Now, Molly, let me ask you a question, right? I think that Pearson and Post had very different purposes, right? Molly, why was Post on this hunt, this pursuit? What was he doing?
Well, if he had like this hound and his dog with him, then it's probably like for the sole purpose of catching something.
Was this for food? Was he hungry? Did he want to eat some fox? Do you think he was going to sell it?
Well, if he was looking for like the profit of it in the end, like that's precisely.
Oh no, but why do you think he had the elaborate hunt with the dogs in the house? What was this for? Was this for his livelihood? What do you think it's for? Why was he doing this?
To catch a fox.
Well, yeah, to catch fox, but you can do lots of things with your time. Why was he trying to do this with his time?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Why was he trying to catch a fox? For what purpose was he doing this?
I didn't think it was like for a livelihood.
No, what's it for? Why do people go hunting? No. Oh, maybe, but sport.
Make money?
No, it's sport. It's just for fun.
Oh, okay.
It's a hobby, right? I think we can say this is sort of a hobby, and it's a very the note discusses it's a very aristocratic hobby, right? Kind of like an upper class thing. Wealth people do. They go on the hunt. They have these dogs. They have these hounds. They have these various, the outfits. It's a hobby. It's a sport, right? I don't know. I'm not a hunter, so maybe I don't know. But most people who hunt aren't doing it primarily for the food. They're doing it for the hobby, for the sport of it, right? Okay. Marty, let me ask you a follow-up question. Why do you think Pearson killed the fox?
I think what I was saying that Pearson was from old money, those was from new money,
Yeah,
and they had this dispute going on.
they did, didn't they?
They had this dispute, and he just wanted to let him know. So I think it was
Do you-
personal vendetta.
Do you think Pearson approved of this elaborate hunt with the dogs and the hounds, other stuff?
I don't think so, because I think it was on public land too.
It was on a public beach, which actually matters. No one, by the way, no one owned the beach, so there's no ration solely, right? No one owned the fox. That was in the case. So good. All right. Oh, I know your name. Was it Lauren? And is that a Wicked v. Filburn shirt?
Mhm.
What's it say?
Go against the grain.
Who here gets that? Anyone Wicked v. Filburn go against the grain? You'll get in common law. It's a Supreme Court case. That's funny. Okay. So, Lauren, let me ask you this question then. How should this dispute have been resolved, right? We have a dispute between old money and new money, aristocratic, old school, new school. How should they resolve this dispute? What would be like the normal way of doing it?
I have no idea. Privately?
Yeah. How do most people resolve their disputes? Do they go to court?
No.
No. Do they go to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the state? How do they resolve this dispute? How could they resolve it? How do hunters usually resolve their disputes? Privately. But they didn't do that. Why do you think they went to the court here?
To establish some sort of precedent,
No, that's not how people go to court.
to seek a remedy.
Yeah, they want to resolve a dispute, they couldn't, okay? So this case is brought to the court, right? We have a majority, we have a dissent, and I did a poll. You guys are roughly split right down the middle. All right, Trey, I'll ask you question 3 that's on the list. We'll just ask you one-on-one. Trey, what law governed this dispute in New York in 1805?
I thought that the case said that there wasn't established.
There was not. Were there any statutes enacted by New York or by Congress, perhaps, that governed this dispute?
I don't think so.
No. Now, Trey, I'll just take a step back. Why do you think in the year 1805 there may not have been many laws in New York governing this dispute? What about that time period may be relevant?
I'm not a history guy.
What happened about 30 years earlier in the United States? The 1770s.
I have no idea.
All right, Lauren, what is that one?
Independence?
Yeah. And what do you think happened to a lot of the British laws that were on the books?
Probably they didn't take any effect anymore.
Okay, that's right. Thank you. In 1776, as I'm sure most of you should know, we had a War of Independence. And all the British laws were basically kind of just whoosh, faded away. So the court says there are no municipal regulations, right? There's no statutes governing these disputes. Cameron, you there? Cameron, what about precedent, common law precedent? Are there any common law precedents the court relied on here?
I don't believe so.
Why not?
Because
What court would those precedents have come from? And what do you think they thought about English precedents? Yeah, so they didn't want to go. So, okay, so we have no statutes, right? We have no common law precedents. You sensing a pattern, right? Same thing again, be rich. Same thing in Johnson versus McIntosh. Same business, right? Early American courts did not have precedents to rely on. So, Jason, what did the court look to them?
They looked at Justinian law.
Justinian. Who the hell was
Roman?
Roman law? So let me get this straight. We're not going to look to England, which was like our best friend like 5 minutes ago. Right? We're going to look at Justinian from Rome from 2,000 years ago. Is that right? Does that make any sense?
I'm not entirely sure, but I do think Roman thought was incorporated into the founding.
But was it English thought also?
Yes.
Yeah. So is that Daniel?
Yeah.
Daniel, so let me ask you the same question a little bit differently. Why on earth is a court in New York in the 1800s looking to Justinian, who lived like more than 1,000 years earlier during the Roman Empire when they had the togas and stuff, right? Why? Why?
Maybe to distance themselves from the British.
Sure, but that's going pretty far back, right? Why do you think why are these Roman, my goodness, Roman sources, right? Julius Caesar, right? Why are we looking to Roman sources?
Seems like a pretty philosophical question of like what actually possession is. So we're looking to ancient philosophy.
Okay, I'll ask you one more question, I'll let you go. Why are ancient philosophies relevant to a modern day dispute over a fox?
Those ancient philosophies ask a very similar question.
Oh, okay. Is that John? Yes. John, I'll ask you the same question. Why are these ancient philosophers relevant to our modern day dispute over hunting of foxes?
They provide a basis to go off of, or to base your judgment off of.
What do you mean they provide a basis? What does that mean?
They give you like a starting point rather than. Sure.
What? So let me ask the question this way, right? Let's get a better angle. Let me ask the question a little bit differently. Hello, TV land. Right? If stuff is still being read after 1,000 years, right? So 1,000 years later, we're still reading Justinian. What does that say about Justinian's digests?
I knew what they were talking about.
Yeah, right. If we're still reading stuff after 1,000 years, that suggests it has some value. Is that Kyle? Kyle, why do you think? Now, let me ask the same question a little bit differently. Why do you think after 1,000 years, Justinian's digests still have value? I mean, again, Roman times lived very different times, very different people, different society, different government. Why do you think this stuff still has value?
Maybe because it's a dispute over animal hunts, and that was something that they dealt with way back.
Oh, so nothing new under the sun, right? It's from the Bible, right? Nothing new under the sun. So the same fight about animal hunting that existed in the time of the Roman Empire exists today. Very good. Right. So let me try and just summarize what we're talking about. They didn't want to look at British sources, right? They didn't want to look at British cases. So they said, all right, let's look to the ancients. And if there's some rule that's been around for 1,000 years and we're still studying it, then it's probably a good rule. Right? Why? Because people hunting animals today, people hunted animals 1,000 years ago. But not quite. Zach, in the times of the Romans, why do you think people hunted animals?
For necessity.
For food, right? They want to eat. Why is Mr. Post hunting the animal?
For sport, for fun.
For sport, for fun. So do you think the rationales that Justinian considered are the same sort of rationales that our modern society would also consider?
I guess in part, but probably not for the majority.
Right. So in other words, why are we being governed by the dead hand of the past? Right. The Romans had a very different society, a very different civilization than we did. Why are we even looking to what the rules are? Who cares what the Romans thought? The Dissent says, do we not have a right to make our own rules? Right? We're a new nation, a new country. Do we not have the right to form our own common law rules? I won't get me so far. Garrett, let me ask you this question now on the flip side. Let's say the court came out differently and said, you know what? We don't care about the Romans. They're gone. We don't care about Puffendorf and Barber Act, other people. They're in other countries. Forget them. What would the court have relied on if they said, forget all these other people? What would the court have relied on if they said, we're not going to work with these other people?
Either their own opinion or English common law.
Well, not going to do British. So they rely on their own opinions. What does it mean, their own opinions?
Sorry?
What do you mean rely on their own opinions? That's a good thought.
I mean, just apply whatever rule that they think fits. So
Would that be a very good judicial decision?
Probably not.
The court says, we're going to rule for Post because we think it's the best option. How's that opinion read to you if you're just your lawyer reading that opinion?
Well, biased.
Biased. So what do the judges have to do then? They can't just say that outright.
Disguise it using old rules.
Ooh, disguise. What do you mean disguise? It's a very, very savvy word to use. What do you mean disguise?
I guess hide their own opinion by using the 6th century Roman emperor's opinion.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that judges simply use authority as a way to dress up their opinions in the language of law, what they really just think? Is that what you're saying, Garrett? Are you? It's okay if you're saying that, but is that what you're saying? Kind of.
I mean,
yeah. Okay. Fine. You said enough. Good. No. Look, Garrett, I think makes a fair point, right? If the judges had come out and said, you know what, there's no authority on point. We're just gonna make crap up. Post to win, right? That would not be law, right? That would not be what we consider law. Now, I'm going to just maybe disagree just slightly with Garrett. I don't think judges are or at least most judges, are just going to make stuff up and just pick whatever authorities provide the best support for them. I think the judges are actually grappling with this issue, right? I think there's a hard case. And I think the poll, which I gave you, is almost 50-50, shows that even today is a hard case. What makes this case so hard is the authorities they have are divided. There are some authorities that go one way, and there's some authorities that go the other way. So then how is a judge to decide which authority to go with? Right? That's always the dispute. It's very rare for a judge to have a case of first impression where there's no authority, right? I mean, let's just be honest, that almost never happens, right? By the time a case gets to the Supreme Court, there's some authority, right? There's some lower court opinion, right? There's some congressional report. There's some authority to go on. So true cases of first impression almost never happen. They really don't. The role of the judge then is to decide which type of authority to rely on. And that's actually why I gave you the Splunkian case, right? Which shows how judges take the same sort of authority and perhaps read it differently. And it's not about bias. I think someone might have said bias. I'm going to just maybe use a different word. I would use judicial philosophy, right? Judges have different philosophies, just like you and I do. If I polled all 70 of you on various issues, I'd probably get 70 different opinions, right? It's not because you're smart or stupid or good or bad person. We all have just different beliefs. And that's fine. We're allowed to. We live in a polity of different views. That's healthy, right? And judges come from our society, and they have different philosophies. So then the question becomes, why did the majority look at these authorities and go one way? And why did the dissent look at these authorities go the opposite way? Right? These are both smart judges. Again, Judge Tompkins became vice president of the United States. Judge Livingston became a Supreme Court justice of the United States. So they went all the way up. These are not stupid people. These are very successful people. Actually, Judge Tompkins has said he became an alcoholic, and he became a total he became a total drunk. And so even though he was vice president, he never actually did his job. He kind of just he wasn't even present for most of the Senate sessions. So he had a sad ending. He actually died in Staten Island, where I'm from. That's my hometown. So there's a place called Tompkinsville, which is named after him. Anyway, unimportant. But these are successful people by most measures, right? Sorry, didn't see a downer there. But why are these judges reading opinions differently? So let's start with the dissent. We'll come back to the majority in a few minutes. Bailey, help me out here. Walk me through the dissent, please. To start off, who did the dissent rule for? Whose post? The Hunter. Okay. So the dissent rule for the post on the Hunter. On what basis did the dissent rule for the Hunter? Okay, very good. So the dissent follows labor theory, right? Caitlin, which philosopher is cited in support of this labor theory? Yeah, who's the authority that the dissent finds most persuasive? It's got a name. What's his name? Mention the majority as well. I'll come back to you. Oh my goodness, Rebecca, you gotta make that bigger. I can barely see that. Here, just take a marker. Smaya has it. Yeah, so do it later. If you have your little letters, I can't. My eyes are getting worse. I didn't use that glasses. Rebecca, what's the name of the philosopher that dissent finds most persuasive?
So I didn't have one kind of persuasiveness but he did mention that irregardless of Justinian,
Yeah, I know we've done Justinian. Let's try this a different way, right? So we talk about labor theory. I'll come back to Caitlin. We talk about labor theory. Who's the philosopher we usually associate labor theory? John Locke, right? Is John Locke mentioned in this case? But who is mentioned that supports labor theory?
Is it Proteus?
No, not Grotius. Yeah, what's your name?
Chad.
Chad, do you have your card?
No, I don't, I left it at
Chad, who
home.
am I talking about?
Barber Act?
Barber Act. Yeah, that's in there. Barber Act, right? So Barber Act was actually a follower of John Locke. So when they discuss when they discuss Barber Act, just think of Locke, right? And Locke's theory, which we discussed, is that often physical capture is not necessary. Locke wrote that the pursuit might be sufficient. And Barber Act said much the same, right? But the hard question is, and this is going back to Rebecca. Rebecca, how much pursuit is needed under the labor theory to acquire the fox?
Enough that they would have a reasonable prospect of,
Good. Say that again.
a reasonable prospect of catching.
Okay, so that's the test that the Dissent sort of adopts, right? With the labor theory, physical capture is not necessary. But instead, you must have a reasonable prospect. That's the phrase used. A reasonable prospect of acquiring the animal. You're with me. So is that Ashley? Ashley, here comes the hard question, right? What's a reasonable prospect of capturing a fox?
I guess you're in the last steps of capturing it.
Okay, that's smart. Last step. What do you mean last step?
Like you are.
I know it's hard. How close, Ashley, do you have to get to be within a reasonable prospect of capturing the animal? It is, isn't it? Well, let me try this differently, Ashley. In this case, do you have any evidence about how close was the fox? Then why is the Dissent so sure he had a reasonable prospect of taking it? You see the problem, right? See the problem with labor theory. Angela, ask the same question. Give me a test that we can follow. How close do you have to get to have a reasonable prospect of capturing the fox?
I think you have to get pretty close.
Well, be a little precise.
Maybe within a yard.
Okay, a yard. Why a yard? Why did you pick that number?
Because it's about. Because I can imagine being able to either. I can imagine being able to use something within that.
Oh, good.
distance.
What are the things you're using? That's actually what I'm getting at.
Yeah, like a gun. Your gun. You have a reasonable prospect of actually shooting.
Shooting. So you're shooting distance, right?
Yeah.
Or throwing a net,
Or
maybe,
a net, yeah.
or throwing a spear. Okay, Trey? No, you're Trey. Okay. Trey. Yeah, I only saw one answer, two. There's a 50-50 shot. Okay, Trey. What's a reasonable prospect? How do we define that?
I know Jason mentioned within arm's reach.
It said within reach. I don't know if it said within arm's reach. It said within reach, which would mean the reach of your arm, or the reach of a gun, or reach of a net. What if you have your dogs and you sick your dogs on the fox? The dogs, I mean, that's why they make a big deal with the dogs, right? These aren't beagles, right? These are the huge, hunting dogs, and they can chase down the fox, presumably, right? All right, so the Dissent basically says, I would favor the writings of Barber Act. And so long as you have a reasonable prospect of taking the fox, you don't need to have physical touch. And the word they use is a funny word, mancupation. You see this word? Mancupation, mancupation. It means bodily touch. Think of like mano, hand, right? hand, okay? So there's not a requirement to actually touch the animal under the dissent theory. Now, I think someone said it before, the dissent wasn't too keen on citing just Colin, right? Why was the dissent not so eager to cite the Roman emperor?
They didn't really like what he had to say about like not allowing pursuit of life.
Well, they disagree with him for sure, but I think he had a bigger objection than the actual substance. What was the bigger objection?
More about like they wanted to get rid of boxes, and therefore they would prefer to use people to go out and take boxes.
Okay, right. So why did Justinian adopt this rule that you have to have physical touch? Back in the Roman time, what was their policy? What were they trying to encourage? But did they have the elaborate hunts with the dogs and the hounds back in Roman times? Why were they killing animals? For food. Different policy today. And what the dissent says is we should not be governed by the dead hand of the past, right? We have our own nation. Let's make our own rules. Whatever concerns were on the mind of Justinian 1,000 years ago, we have different concerns. Right? So he really, maybe I'll go back to Garrett for this one. Do you think, I don't mean to pick on you, but you have a good answer before. Do you think, it's a glutton for punishment, right? Do you think the dissent really cared what Barber Act thought?
Probably not.
Did he really think what 17th century French philosophers cared? Was that really important to him?
I doubt it.
So what was really on his mind?
Well, I mean, I think he was really caring more about his own personal ideology. I guess, like, what
I mean, this is not ideological hunting, right? It's not like a conservative liberal. This is a
well, yeah, you have your own objectives, I guess, when you're facing an issue that wasn't difficult.
yeah. So I think again, I didn't mean to pick on Garrett, but I suspect to give the answer I was looking for, so that's why I called him again. I think that's probably right. The dissent really doesn't care about any of this nonsense. It's a very sarcastic dissent. Did you get that reading it? He's very sarcastic, and he uses a lot of Latin phrases to no avail, right? These are just, if you can Google them if you want, but they're basically these Latin phrases that just like have this like very, very boastful, very ostentatious, very showing off, and he's just making fun of the majority. He's like, well, we have all these Latin phrases and Barber Act and Justinian. He's making fun of them, right? In his mind, this case should have been decided by sportsmen, right? I think I asked this to someone over there, right? This was designed for arbitration, right? People can just work out their disputes themselves. Split the value of the fox, right? Do something normal. Don't waste our time, the highest court in the state, over a fox, right? This is not a good use of judicial resources at all. And he was annoyed, like, why are you bringing this to us? But he couldn't just withdraw, could he? Judges aren't allowed to just withdraw from cases, are they? Ooh, one of them did. Yeah, stay tuned for later, right? But you could tell he's like, this is a waste of my time. I don't even want to decide this case. But he said, we got to do something. Let's only pick the rule that makes the most sense, which was the rule of labor. All right. Any questions on the dissent? We'll come back to the dissent later. I want to do the majority next. Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
So when I was reading that dissent, I had to do some research on the guy that they were citing.
Which one? Barber Act?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just had a question because it appears that he got kicked out of France at one point.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Man, you'd be really bad to be kicked out of France. Their standards are not very high.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was mean. That was mean. I'm sorry for your French people. I apologize. Man, you got kicked out of France. You got to really screw up. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, are you French, Pierre?
I mean, yeah, my name is French.
Okay, that's what you It's okay.
Yeah. But it turns out that my question was, technically they didn't want to cite the British, obviously, because we just had independence from them. And, France was somehow a friend of the US,
It
I would
was.
say. So I was like, why would you cite a Frenchman who
Was
was
kicked
kicked
out.
out of France?
It's very strange, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, honestly, if John Locke was Scottish, which is kind of British as well. I mean, that's why I didn't cite him. They also don't mention William Blackstone, who was one of the leading British scholars. So I think they're picking and choosing their countries in a very strange fashion. I'm sorry, I'm not a Francophile. I'm the opposite of a Francophile, I guess. The French and the Americans had a very close relationship because they aided in the War of Independence. During the Revolutionary War, the French helped us. They aided the British. It was this weird triangulation. If you watch the Hamilton musical, you can see this with Marquis Lafayette. All right. A couple of years ago, actually, Hamilton came to Houston. I shouldn't tell you this, get mad at me. And I actually got tickets, and I gave them to people who had the highest score in midterms. Anyway, so that was. I don't have tickets anymore. I don't subscribe. I used to subscribe, and I had tickets. I actually saw it on Broadway when it first came out. So I saw it, and so I gave the highest A in my midterm tickets, and they were happy. Anyway. All right. Anything else in the dissent? I'll do to the majority. No, I'm not giving you tickets. Go. Gabriel, go ahead.
So I was a little confused, I guess, because there was a footnote, if I remember correctly, that talks about how the dissent specifically referred to the Barber Act instead of law.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't clear on what, because when I was reading it, I'm thinking, well, this seems to lend itself to labor
It
theory,
is.
but he didn't really specifically go to labor theory. So I don't know if
It's
there was a
close.
reason
Yeah, again, maybe it was an aversion to English. Locke was Scottish. Maybe an aversion to Scottish authorities. We don't really know. I when I was a law student many years ago, I had the same question: why do you cite law? And there's not a good answer. So you're asking good questions, not a good answer. Maybe he was drunk. I don't know. No, he was actually the non-drunk. The drunk was the majority. So he was. Maybe he was thinking about other things. So let's go into the majority, right? So the majority cites different sources, right? So first they looked at Justinian, and we've talked about Justinian. Is it Brissa? Or, I called him Colin, right? Okay, so Brissa, let me call on you, please. Brissa, what actually did Justinian say? We've talked about him for almost 45 minutes. What was his rule?
He said to sit along the dock of property or right to princemen, even wounding the animal is irrespectful unless the animal has been physically taken.
Okay, so Justinian said you have to have physical capture. And they also cite Bracton and Fleta, which have similar rules. Morgan. So then we have the next group of scholars. Puffendorf, one of my favorite names in all of law school. His name is wonderful. What did Puffendorf say?
He said that he defined occupancy of animals to be like actual corporal possession.
Corporal. What does corporal mean?
I think it was like physical control.
I can't hear you.
I assumed it was like physical control.
You ever have corporal punishment?
Yeah,
You know what that means?
like I know in context, but I don't know the actual.
When you get physical touching, they beat you up.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, they paddle, whatever, right? Corporal, corpus, right? Means body. Touching the body. Corpus Christi, right? Touching the body. Puffendorf says you need to have physical touch. They also cite Binkershoek, who's a Dutch philosopher. And he said mere pursuit is not enough to assert a legal right. Mere pursuit's not enough. Okay, so those are the rules so far. But the majority says there are some other rules. There are contrary rules in other books, contrary principles in other books. So, Victoria, let me ask this question. The same question you have to Gary, maybe we'll answer it differently, right? What's a judge to do when there's contrary principles? Some of the authorities go one way, and other authorities kind of go the other way. What's a judge to do in that case, Victoria? And how do you know which one they like better? Well, what do you mean what they like? You got to be a little more specific.
They would pick whichever authority they think makes their argument strongest, and that's what they're citing to, or which authority they choose to use.
So why? So you're presuming they have an answer at the beginning, and then this entire enterprise is finding stuff that supports their answer?
Maybe not necessarily. They may go through all of the different authorities, but they're only going back to use the ones that they choose, or whichever ones they decide.
But how do they decide? I mean, if we say that, maybe Garrett says they made their mind up on the first day of the case, and they just sort of, look different things to find to piece together an answer. You can take that position, but maybe there's another position, right? How might also judges sort of pick and choose from different authorities? No?
So, notes, the court want like, for the sake of certain, very deep orders, hiding.
Excellent.
that result.
Excellent. Exactly what I'm looking for. So that's actually question 4, which you just answered, right? So you saw my poll question. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. All right. So Fidel, which opinion makes more certainty in society? Is this monitor working? Yeah, okay. Make sure. Okay. No, you did the wrong one. Which you answered. Oh, duh. But why? Why? I thought you gave me such a good first answer, right? You talk about certainty. Which rule creates more certainty in this case?
Majority because the actual possession of it.
Why does the majority rule create more certainty?
Because what we said earlier about how do you know, like what distance you have to be at.
Good. What would have happened to that? One last question, I'll let you go. If they ruled for if they ruled for the jerk, they ruled for the hunter, right?
It'll create a lot of mitigation.
Exactly. The court says if we take the labor theory, right, it'll create to a lot more litigation because people will come to court with all these disputed facts where there's not clear evidence. We don't know how close they were to the fox, right? We have no idea how long they were hunting for. We want to create a rule for certainty. Now, let's see, Luke, is there any statute that says court should favor certainty?
No.
Why would a judge maybe favor certainty?
Makes their job a little easier.
You damn right it does, right? If you were a judge, which would you rather have, a bright line rule or some sort of mushy factor labor theory?
Right line rule.
All right, so now let me go back to Victoria, right? You're a judge, and you're confronted with 2 rules. One, clear, easy, bright line. Another, open-ended, balancing, many factors. You have to pick. There are authorities on one side, authorities on the other side, right? How do you pick which authority you want to use?
The one that provides you with certainty.
What do you call that? There's a word lost in tape when judges have those sort of considerations of why to pick one rule or the other. What do you call that? What's that called? Josh? Lost in tape, that phrase was when a judge picks one or the other, why they pick one or the other. What do you call that?
Efficiency.
What? No. Efficiency is actually something else. It's an example I'm asking. What's what I'm thinking of? Anyone know?
Public policy?
Public policy. Yeah. Well, students hate that word, but it's true, right? When a teacher, professor asks you a policy question, right? They're not asking what the law is, right? The law is labor theory capture, right? Those are what the law is. Policy is why you pick one or the other. And one of the values society tries to promote is certainty. Clear rules that are easy to follow in a case, so people know what the rule is. If the court adopts the capture theory from the majority, it's easy. You get the fox, it's yours. But if the court adopts the dissenting view of the labor theory, you have all these conflicts where no one knows who was closer, how far away were you, how many hours you're hunting, how big were your dogs, right? Society is an interest in favoring certain rules. Bright line rules, lawsuits love bright line rules. Okay? So that's not necessarily a judge sort of just picking the answer he likes the best. I think a court can credibly say, we want a rule that creates certainty. And the court does say that, right? The court says this rule promotes certainty and preserves peace and order in society. That's right from the opinion. Right? The other rule creates, quote, a fertile source of litigation and quarrels. The court says outright, we want a rule for certainty. And that's fine. It's completely valid. Now, Josh, I'll come back to you. Josh, which rule is more fair? The majority or the dissent?
I'd probably say the dissent.
Why do you say the dissent?
Because, Congress said in the Well case, people bear the fruits of their labor. And they had the dogs out and they're running after the.
So it's unfair to take the fox away from the hunter spent all this time trying to hunt it, right? So Josh, which public policy do you think the dissent care about more, certainty or fairness?
Fairness.
Fairness. Everyone hear that? So I think what you have is 2 judges who are motivated by different public policies. Right? It's not just ideology. I think the majority was saying, let's get a clear rule, easy to apply. Let's make it fair. Right? Let's make it certain. Let's make it very easy, clean, bright line. And the dissent said, enough with your stupid bright line rules. Let's reward the person who worked harder. Let's create incentives for people to engage in this useful activity of hunting. Right? And in fact, you guys split right down the middle. I bet if I were to ask you why you pick what you picked, these are some things you might volunteer of why you pick what you pick. I don't know, but I'm just guessing. Right? This is why I love the Fox case. It's so simple, but it's so deep and profound. There's so many different levels. I've been teaching this case for a decade. I always see new things every time I teach it. It's kind of surreal, but true. Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
I'm wondering if the court considered applying equitable division.
They should have. Yeah, that would be funny. You split the fox in half, just like the baseball game. They could have. You get half the value, you get half the value. But these guys hate each other, right? This is like Papa and Hayashi. They hate each other because they're fighting all the way to the highest court in the land. And it's like years, right? They're spending years litigating a stupid fox that's worth a couple bucks. Good question. All right, everyone with me. Oh, yeah, go, Daniel.
So, is there a clear majority and minority view on this?
No way, Jose. No way. Not a clue. No way. Absolutely not. Students always ask this question after torts and contracts. There's no majority view on property in anything, right? Property law is so disparate, right? There's not a there is a restatement of property of known use, right? There's no uniform property code. It's all different. And in the same case, judges use both labor and capture theory. Think of the baseball case, right? The judge used capture theory, who got it, then he put labor theory into the distribution of the remedy. So no way. There's no clear bright line rule. But good question, but the answer is no. And someone else thinking, oh man, what did I write on my exam? But you got to work through the question. It might be A, might be B, depending on the question. It might be all the above. It might be C in for once. Okay. All right. Question so far. All right. Yeah. Armand, go ahead.
Is the court not considering that maybe Pearson was just a better hunter and he was able to find where the fox went quicker, even though?
Well, yes. Yeah, so let me just unpack your question. Why are you assuming Pearson's a jerk? Right? Maybe Pearson was actually just such a good hunter that he found. He's like, zip, got it. He didn't need like 15 dogs and hounds. He was like, zip, done. So that goes back to my point before. Measuring the amount of effort you put in is not always a good reflection of how hard you work, right? Someone could be an excellent hunter and find the fox in 5 seconds, or it could be me who takes 8 hours and then find the damn thing. So another difficulty with labor theory is how do you assess different levels of skill, right? If I am a skilled artisan, I could make something in a few minutes, right? If I'm a lousy artisan, it takes me an entire day to make something. How do you compare those things? Many difficulties with labor theory. And now let me point out some problems with the capture theory, right? Does the majority, is that Dylan? If you could just make that bolder, it's kind of little letters. Just find the marker, it's somewhere. Whoever has it, just send it to Dylan. Does the majority say that you need physical touch in 100% of the cases? Physical capture 100% of the time? How does the majority think you can capture it without actually capturing it? What does the majority say you can do? Okay, if you throw a net on the fox, let's just say, for example, you throw a net on the fox, it gets tangled up, and then Pearson comes in and takes the net and runs away. Who has a fox in that case? There's a stronger claim.
I would say both trying to get out on the fox.
Why?
He sent everything to a certain
What does throwing the net on the fox do? What's the phrase used in the opinion? You deprive the animal of its natural liberty. So what the court says is it's not required to physically capture the fox in every case. You have to deprive it of its natural liberty. Nick, what does this phrase mean, natural liberty? Let's just try and unpack that for a bit.
Just the freedom you possess in the nature, be able to move around, go wherever you please.
All right, so let's say you shot a fox in its leg. You didn't kill it, but you slowed it down. Have you deprived it of its natural liberty?
Depends how much you slow it down.
I don't know if I have. I don't know. Make something up. Just answer the question.
Yes,
Why?
because it should no longer go about its way.
Yeah, but what if a fox can still escape you even at half its normal speed?
Yeah, like that.
So what's the criteria then if you deprive it of its natural liberty?
It has to be mortally wounded.
But again, you shot it, you didn't mortally wound it, you just slowed it down. It's not going to die from that. Please right away. What do you think? And I don't see a name tag.
Yeah, sorry, Hunter.
Hunter, what do you think? Oh, your name is Hunter. Oh, good. Very nice. What do you think, Hunter?
It just comes out.
Yeah, something like that. Your entire life is waiting for this question. Natural liberty, right?
Yeah.
What's unique to private animal that's natural liberty?
Yeah, so going back to when it was wounded, I would say in a way it does, but it still has the freedom and mobility to go about it.
All right, so let's say you shoot an animal, you slow it down a bit, and then some bear comes along and eats the animal. Did you deprive it of its natural liberty?
I would say fair to it.
There, no, but the question is you, because you claimed the fur.
I don't know how you.
Yeah, the bear bites it, lets it go. The question is, piercing the carcass.
I would say not complete the deprivation of the natural liberty, considering you had wounded it, and the other thing came along and then I guess finalized that.
Hunter, I'll change it up a bit, right? You shoot a fox, it injures its leg, because it can't really walk around, it starves to death and dies. And then piercing picks up the carcass. Did you deprive it of its natural liberty?
Yes, because inevitably that wound led to death.
All right, so let's go back to the whale for a minute, right? When you shot the whale, you blew up its sides, it kind of bled out and fell on the ocean. That was in a way depriving of its natural liberty. It can no longer swim. All right, so the majority acknowledge capture something without physically laying hands on it. Mortal wounding is perhaps enough because you're depriving the animal of its natural liberty, which is a phrase the court does not define, but I think Hunter and Nick gave a decent definition. You're doing something to limit its mobility, that it can't move around on its own. Right? The definition of a wild animal is it moves around. Right? It can escape, it can run away from it, it's not domesticated. And if you prevent it from exercising that natural liberty, you can claim it. Trey. Well, kind of, yeah, but it's more the animal can't do what it was born to, which is run away from you, right? The definition of a wild animal is its ability to run around, right? That's why it's wild. It's not domesticated. Domesticated animals are very different, right? A cow is going to stay where it is, right? The cow will stay put. Here?
Yeah, so going back to what, the hypothetical of, let's say you shoot it and it uses 50% of, its speed, that would still be considered taking away its natural
I think
liberty,
so.
right?
I think so, yeah.
Even if it's at 10%, I would say. Because naturally,
Yeah.
they can run at a certain speed.
Yeah, I don't think there's an exact science, but I think you're in the right ballpark. Yeah, good point. Yeah, did it happen?
No.
You're laughing, okay.
Yeah.
I assume you're laughing. I can't see one's mouth, but I'm assuming there's laughter. Yeah, Anwar.
Cases like this are going to like jury.
Look, I'm sure Judge Livingston was pissed at this case. Can you imagine a jury fighting over a $25 fox? I'm sure. I mean, why not? I mean, I suppose it's a jury question. I think you're disputing fact, right? It's not a pure question of law. So I think the jury can probably resolve it. But who's more credible, the hunter or the jury? The jury question. Sure, why not? What else? All right, let me wrap up this case. We're getting ready for our last case, which probably has you all perplexed, but it'll make sense, I promise. The majority adopts more or less the rule of capture. But the rule of capture here is not absolute. He says you can capture an animal, even if you don't physically touch it, if you mortally wounded it. You shot it. You put a net on it. Maybe you let your dogs loose, and the dogs, bit the fox, and then that wounded them, right? The dissent favors a labor theory. And the dissent says it's yours if you have a reasonable prospect of taking the fox. And I think motivating both opinions was different public policy concerns. The majority was focusing on a certain bright line, clear rules. And the dissent was focusing on a rule promoting efficiency, a rule promoting fairness, a rule encouraging people to engage in elaborate hunts. And really, Pearson has elements of Gen v. Rich, has elements of the baseball case, has elements of the duck case, which is why actually I teach you out of order. It's early in your book. I kind of flip things up. I think it makes more sense here. Maybe you think I'm wrong, but I always think it makes more sense here after these other cases. All right. Questions then on the Fox case. Questions in the Fox case. No? All right, so let's go on. Now you're saying to myself, Josh, what are you doing? Why on earth, it's okay, be honest, why on earth are you assigning this thing with the cave and the cannibals? What the hell's wrong with you, right? Okay, I'll explain what my thinking, which maybe you don't agree with, but I'll at least explain myself. Very often in law school, law students sort of don't get a big picture of how judges decide cases, right? A lot of you were kind of a little bit uneasy when I asked you, why is the judge deciding the case this way or that way? You were a little bit because you're so fixated on learning what the law is, you often lose sight of how the law gets to be that way and how judges decide it. So the assignment I gave you, this Splunking Explorers, is a classic article. It's from the 1940s. It's a classic. It's been taught in law schools for almost 70 years. And it's designed to teach you how different types of judges reach different conclusions with the same facts and the same law. And it's not to say one judge is good or bad, or maybe you agree or disagree with one over the other, but it's a way of teaching these different methods of judicial decision-making. And what I'll show you, I hope at least, is how the Pearson v. Post opinion maps onto the Splunking case. You'll see overlaps that might actually shed more light in the Fox case. So let's just let's do this poll first. Number 7. Oh shoot, I didn't. Let's do multiple choice. Thing keeps jumping around. It's very obnoxious. Okay. Which opinion would you have joined? The majority. I'm sorry. Chief Justice Truepenny, Justice Keene, Justice Foster. I know there were 2 Foster opinions. Just whichever Foster opinion is fine. Either one. Justice Handy, and then our good friend Judge Tating. There is no F. You can't put an F. That wouldn't even allow it to happen. There, another 5 seconds. Excuse me. All right, I'll stop it here. Passing. This is actually very similar to my other class. Almost the same breakdown. Very similar. Okay. All right. So the background of this case is about cannibalism. Now, did you read in Crim, Regina versus Dudley and Moore? Some people saying yes, some saying no. The cannibalism case, where they're stuck at sea. Did you or not? A note. Oh, and so who read the notes, right? See, The notes matter. They're there for a reason. Actually, so I should be someone else. I have a con law casebook. We have no notes. There are no notes in our casebook, just cases. I think the notes are, anyway, unimportant, but they're in your book. You got to read them. So this is based on a true story of people who were at sea. Their ship was wrecked. They're in a lifeboat. And then they're at sea. They have no food. They have no water. And then they decide to eat one of their colleagues. And then they're rescued. And then they're tried for murder. So this is actually based on a true story. All right. Who am I up to? Yeah, Gabriel. You want to give me the facts here in the Spelunking case? It's pretty gruesome, but just walk through.
Pretty much, they're this hypothetical society. There's this group, spelunking.
Spelunking means cave, climbing a cave. That's what spelunking means.
Yeah, so they're led by a man named Wetmore. He's leading this exploration in the cave. There's basically a cave in. They end up trapped. They try to stay near the entrance where it's caved in. Everyone outside tries to get in. 10 people end up dying in the attempt.
Yeah, let me just pause there. Isn't that kind of messed up? That 10 people died trying to rescue these people who got stuck in the cave. Doesn't that make you feel a little guilty? Like whenever I see a person, I'm sorry, I didn't mean any people ski or hike, but they get hikers going hiking in the middle of a winter blizzard and they get stuck, right? And then people die trying to rescue them. That always makes me upset because they never hiking. They could just not hiking. I'm sorry, it's true. Yeah, go on.
Pretty much 10 people die in the attempt. Meanwhile, they've established some form of radio communication with them inside to the devices they had. And Westmore is discussing with physicians, and they end up passing the buck along to different groups. So there were first was physicians who were checking on them, and then Wetmore proposes if they're told they can't survive much longer. I think it was 10 more days before they're rescued, all that out through the water. And so he asks, well, what if we eat somebody in here? And then
So this was Wetmore's idea, right? Wetmore's idea, what if we eat someone? What's going to happen? You know, karma's a bitch, as they say, right? Go on.
So he puts that nobody outside really wants to say.
Don't ask me. I don't want to talk about it, right?
So everyone's just passing the buck along. So they talk to priests.
Yeah, no.
Every kind of person in society. And so
You want to judge, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And they end up getting them out later on, and it turns out that they agreed, made a compact.
Okay, so let's just stop. Whose idea was this to roll to do this dice thing?
Wetmore.
Okay. And then what happened when they actually rolled the dice?
He withdrew before they threw his dice or died, but
He tried to back out.
yeah, he tried to back out before they threw his dice. So someone ended up throwing them for him, and he lost, and they.
Yeah, and then they ate him. So again, if you're ever stuck in the cave, don't be the one proposing cannibalism. It's gonna come for you. They're gonna eat you. That's just gonna happen. All right, Gabriel, very good. Yes, gross case, but it's there. Okay, so then they're charged with murder, right? So is that Dakota?
Yeah.
Dakota, let me ask this question. If you were the prosecutor, right? Would you have brought this case?
No.
Why do you say no?
Because I've never been trapped in a case for 20 days with other people and know what is going through their head. What can and can't be done in that situation.
But it was a murder, right? I'm sure Wetmore's family is not very happy with this outcome. Their father, their uncle, their brother was murdered. You don't care?
But what about the 10 people that died from the table?
So how does killing another person make it better?
It doesn't just about it.
But they don't actually, Kevin, what do you think? Would you brought the prosecution?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, yeah. So tell me, why would you have brought this indictment? Why would you have brought the prosecution?
Well, for a number of reasons. The main one is that they defy the statute. You have a statute, it's in place. You have to, for society to say, charge anybody that's committed a crime.
Is it, no, guys, one at a time to go. Don't talk next to it. What'd you say?
I asked them if they understood.
It's good. All right. So let me ask this question, Dr. Kevin, okay? Do prosecutors have discretion deciding what crime to bring? This is the speeding ticket.
I would say no, because, I mean,
So every crime, every infraction's got to be brought.
yeah, it has to be brought.
All right, Tori, you were shaking your head violently in this one. What do you think?
No, I wouldn't bring charges against them. I mean, you gotta look at the situation that you're in, right? If you're looking at law just as a blank slate, you gotta look in the context. Like, why did they kill? What happened? What led up to this event?
Mhm.
In the same way you look at like self-defense. Like, okay, okay, yeah, somebody died, but not, well, one thing I know from criminal is not every kill is unlawful. And while this may be unlawful, yeah, you killed one, but you're saving four.
Ah, all right. So I'll leave this point here, but I want to make a point very clear. This doesn't all fall on the judges, right? The judges get the case, but they only get the case because the prosecutor brought the charges, right? So when discussing this case is so unfair, this is unjust, we need a pardon, whatever, fault lies with the prosecutor. No one wanted this case. If he didn't bring the case, it would be over. So now we actually have this trial, right? The jury, the foreman's a lawyer. Always, by the way, lawyers never get on juries. I was called for jury duty a couple of years ago, and then you have to write your occupation on the questionnaire. Sorry, oh god, law professor, right? So I'm like, oh god, please don't pick me. Why? Because I know the law better than the lawyers. I taught them, right? I think one of them was a South Texas grad, right? And so as I was sitting there in the jury room, the veneer as they call it, they were saying, Professor Black. I'm like, oh crap. They started asking me these questions, like, oh no, don't ask me, because I'm a jury. I'm supposed to find facts, not law, and I know exactly what they wanted me for. So I got bounced pretty quickly. But I'm like, lawyers don't go on juries, all right? But the lawyer is like, so can we do this sort of special verdict where we just find the facts and the judge finds the law because he doesn't want the culpability? So again, he's pushing the buck to someone else, and the judge is like, well, based on these facts, I'm obligated to find conviction. And there's only one sentence: is execution. There's no discretion. No, that's the only punishment available in the law. So that goes to the Supreme Court of the state. We have these 5 or 6 opinions, depending how you count them, right? So let's walk them through one at a time, right? What am I up to? Bree, go ahead. Let's talk about Justice Truepenny. What does he say?
Truepenny is all about following the statute.
Okay.
You killed someone, the statute says that is unlawful, and the punishment is death.
Okay.
I think that's correct.
That's right. So he follows the statute rigorously, but then at the end he kind of does something else. He kind of makes a request.
At the end, is that where he says that perhaps we should consider the situation? I can't remember what his caveat was.
Who did he want to ask about this?
Executive.
And what could the executive do to this case? What could the executive do in this case?
The executive could overrule the statute.
What do you call that when an executive overrules a judgment? What's that called? Anyone? A pardon. A pardon, or commute the sentence, right? So the executive is like the governor or the president, right? The president can pardon. Remember, they can pardon the turkeys on Thanksgiving, right? They can pardon that's people know, right? You can pardon the offense or commute the sentence. Okay, so this is kind of like the majority saying, well, I know Pearson is being a jerk, but the law goes to him. But maybe you guys should work it out, right? All right, that's Truepenny. Is that Vicky, or I can't say the name technically to them? Oh, Jocelyn. Okay, that's Vicky. Okay, Jocelyn, let me ask you this question. Foster has 2 separate opinions, right? What's the first opinion from Foster? What does he argue? Very fascinating opinion. People always kind of get their very, very curious about this one. The nature of law. What is this natural law you speak of?
I would think it would be just no law at all.
Was there any law governing this cave? Why was there no law governing this cave? Well, what about the laws of the Newgard, our civilization? These laws not govern there? Why? So, Vicky, what law did they apply then? What was actually the law governing this cave? Yeah. I love the lab. The law of nature, and then what did they do with this law of nature? What law was actually governing it here specifically? But what did they agree upon? What was actually their social compact? Not quite. Okay, thank you. What was their social compact? Exactly. They created a social compact, right? We go back to the state of nature. People come together, make an agreement. Well, they made an agreement. And Nikki, what was that agreement? Yeah, it's life by chance, right? You roll dice, whoever rolls the lowest number gets murdered. It's not if you're an I would like Nate, but if you're they made. Now, Tony, let me ask you a follow-up. Can you back out of the social compact? Wetmore tried to back out, didn't he?
Yeah, he at the end said that he didn't feel he wanted to go through it.
Can you back out of the social compact? Is there a picture breach there?
No, I mean, he came up with the idea.
It's his idea, yeah. Right, so the first Foster opinion is very unusual, but people always find it very sort of thought-provoking. You're in the state of nature, the laws of your society don't govern, so you make your own agreement. You think, Josh, this is insane. Who would ever agree to this? The whalers had their customs. The hunters had their customs. The baseball fans had their customs. In every case this semester, there's been custom and usage. How's that much different than making an agreement? I say, well, because you're killing someone. It's the same idea, right? It's people in a society making their own rules. What made this unique was that there was no contrary law from the government under the Foster opinion because there was no murder statute in effect there. So in the absence of any positive, any statutory law, you make your own custom and agreement usage. Right? So this is really kind of like the Livingston opinion where we just sort of look to these principles. Natural principles. Okay. Foster part 2. Natalie, what was Foster's second thing? Completely, you did a 180, went the other direction. Exactly, right? And what's his interpretation statute? Self-defense. Is there a self-defense exception in the statute itself? So where is he a self-defense exception from? Krista?
Centuries ago, it was established that it was excused, so it was society.
But how do you have an exception to a statute or in the statute? There's no case law for people who need caves.
I mean, I don't know, I was just saying that, because they're saying like there's a statute.
All right, yeah. I'll do it. We're low on time. The thinking is, would the legislature wrote the statute have intended to criminalize the cave situation? People saying absolutely not, right? That, you know, if someone has a gun to your head and you reach out and put the gun and put it to their head and kill them, is that murder? No, it's self-defense. Is there an actual statutory self-defense exception? No, but it's the same idea. We presume the legislature would not have wanted to criminalize that action. Okay, that's Foster 2. Let's do Tating. This is one of the weird ones. Lloyd, what did Tating do?
Well, Tating was expressing how divided he was about the situation.
Yeah, free Pixie. What did he do here? Did a judge do that? You ever seen that before? Why did he withdraw from the case?
He felt that laws didn't quite define the situation, that they were in state nature and they do that. They had to,
Yeah. He threw his hands up in the air and says, I don't know. And the consequence, Lloyd, what's the consequence of him withdrawing on a 5-member court? What happens with an equally divided vote? And they're executed. So by him withdrawing, he wasn't really withdrawing from the case. He knew that he did nothing. The guy got executed. So he wasn't quite neutral. Anwar, Justice Keene, what's Keene argument?
Basically says, you know, that the statute is broken. He also opposes Chief Justice like.
So Keene said follow the statute, murder, done. And what was the criticism of the other judges?
That they were using like their moral
considerations on interpreting the statute.
This is kind of Garrett's interpretation, right? Judges are being cynical. Sorry for picking it. You gave me good insight, so I'll come back to it. So judges should be using their views of morality to make decisions, right?
Correct.
All right, last one. Mike, Justice Handy, what's Handy's argument? Why? Why does Judge Handy reach that result?
Yes, because
How does society feel about this case, Mike?
society feels.
All right, I'll come back. Andres, how does society feel about this case?
So they take a poll and
They take a poll.
yeah, and it's like 90% saying that
Are judges allowed to look at polls?
everything on.
So I asked before to Kevin and Dakota and Arturo, a prosecutor's elected. They can look at polls, can't they? And what happens, Kevin, I'll go back to you for a second. What happens if 90% of your jurisdiction says, don't bring this case? Do you still bring the case?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're not gonna be in office next year, my friend. Yeah, okay, that's good. Stand on your feet, right? Stand on your principles. So the Tating opinion's kind of weird. I'm sorry, the Handy opinion's weird. It's like, well, we should just do what the people want and look at these polls and rule that way. And then he also says, my niece's secretary's cousin knows the governor. This crazy relationship, right? I mean, but let me tell you something. Judges do look at polls. Judges look at election results. They know how things are going. So it's not insane for a judge to do this. It happens all the time, right? So why am I giving you these 5 opinions, right? What's relevance is it, right? These are the ways that judges of all stripes, all Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative decide cases. What you see here is what you get. That's why we're still reading this case 80 years later. Right? True penny is follow the law, but I don't like the result. Right? This is like Pearson gets it, but I hope he actually shares with Post. Keen, follow the statute. That means Pearson gets it, too bad, don't care about the hunter. Foster Part 1 with the state of nature. This is all of our cases looking at Roman law and the philosophers. We don't have precedent. We're going to go to these sort of ancient sources. Foster 2, what's the purpose of the law? Is it to encourage hunting? Or is it to encourage the extinction, the elimination of vermin? Handy. Let's let the people decide. We have all these cases. Let's follow the customs of the fishermen. Let's follow the customs of the sportsmen, right? And you have Tating. I can't decide, so we'll put C on the question, right? Let me start the exit poll in a second, so you have this running. I'll just sort of wrap up. The Fox case, I think, is a very good approximation of this semester, right? It illustrates different ways judges can think about cases. You have the law. Often the law is unclear. The capture doctrine can go one way. You have to require bodily touch. The capture doctrine can go the other way. With labor theory, if you have a reasonable prospect of taking it. How do you pick it? Different policy concerns. You favoring a fair rule or a rule promoting certainty. And these are sorts of issues that will recur the entire semester. That is all I have. We're at time. Arturo? It's the same thing as every day. It's just what's on your mind. What questions you have. What's not clear. Yeah, I won't type it, but that's just the exit poll. And I do read these very carefully, so I appreciate the questions you put in. All right, anything else? I've had 10 people answer, so maybe try it again. Okay. All right. I'll see you later, everyone. Have a good day.